please extend a very warm reception to Mr. Pico Iyer. Kindly join us on the stage, sir. And joining him today is someone whose words carry both poetry and power, and he has had an impact on us for many, many decades now. So please put your hands together also for the chair of our session, Dr. Shashi Tharoor. Welcome, Mr. Iyer. Welcome, Mr. Tharoor. This is a much anticipated session, and we will of course begin with Mr. Iyer first addressing the audience, followed by a Q&A.
One hot midsummer evening, quite a few years ago, I was in my family home in the hills of California, and I saw a distant knife of orange cutting through a faraway hillside. So, of course, I went downstairs and I called the fire department. When I came upstairs again, it was to see that our whole house was encircled by flames 25 meters high, 5 stories high. It was the worst fire in Californian history at the time. It had broken out just up the road from us, and I was caught in the middle of it for 3 hours. I grabbed my mother's cat, we ran outside and jumped into a car to try to escape, and we drove down our narrow driveway. And when we came to the mountain road, we saw we couldn't go up, we couldn't go down. The smoke was so thick that we could hear helicopters above, but they couldn't see us and we couldn't see them. And the fire was so intense that no fire truck could get up to us. The only thing that saved us was a good Samaritan who had been driving along the highway. He'd seen a fire break out in the hills, and because he had a water truck, he drove up to be of help and somehow ended up stranded by chance right next to our driveway. And so when we got there, there he was, shirtless, in his shorts, with a hose. And every time the flames approached from the north, he would poke the hose towards it and they would recede. Every time they would approach from the south, he would poke the hose in the other direction, and really, by saving his life, he saved ours. For 45 minutes on that road, we were actually right under our family home. And so I could see the flames systematically making their way through our living room, and then going downstairs and reducing every last childhood toy and memento to ash. And then moving on to my office and wiping out really my next 8 years of writing, my next 3 books which were in handwritten notes, and in some ways I think demolishing many of my boyhood dreams of becoming a writer. When finally a fire truck was able to get up to us and tell us it was safe to drive downtown, I went to an all-night supermarket, I bought a toothbrush, and that toothbrush was the only thing I had to start a new life. And then I went to a friend's floor, or a friend's house, to sleep on the floor, and of course I was on that floor for many months to come as slowly my mother and I began to reconstruct our lives. And one day another friend who happened to be a local school teacher came there, and he saw me on the floor and he said, "Come on, Pico, you can do better than this." And he told me how every spring he would take his high school classes up to a quiet retreat house, 4 hours by car up the California coast. And according to him, even the most phone-addicted, distractible, fidgety Californian boy only had to spend 3 days in silence, and something in him cooled down and cleared out to the point where my friend said many of his students never wanted to return back to their normal lives. And so, of course, I thought anything that works for a 15-year-old Californian boy, probably ideal for me. And if nothing else, I would have a bed to sleep in, and a wide desk, and a private walled garden overlooking the Pacific Ocean. All the food I could eat, all for $30 a night. So I got into my car, and I began driving up the coast, and many of you know that in Central California, Highway 1 becomes narrower and emptier till you're just in this vast elemental landscape with golden meadows running down from the mountains on one side and the great flat blue plate of the Pacific Ocean on the other. And then I came to an even narrower road that snaked and twisted for 2 miles up to the top of a hill where this retreat house stood. When I got out of my car, the silence was pulsing. It wasn't just an absence of the noise we were just hearing about. It was really a presence, maybe of everything I sleepwalk past in my regular life. And I went down to the small but comfortable room in which I would be sleeping, and just at that moment, a rabbit alighted on the splintered fence in my garden. And I just looked at that rabbit as if it were a miracle. I was absolutely present to that moment. Shortly thereafter, bells began tolling behind me, and I really felt that they were tolling inside of me. There was no division between inner and outer. And after night fell, I took a walk along the road under this great overturned salt shaker of stars, and I could see the taillights of the cars disappearing around the headlands 12 miles to the south. And honestly, I can tell you I've never felt happier and clearer and calmer. Even though 3 hours earlier on the drive up, as usual, I was filled with agitations and debates. So of course I started going back to that place more and more often, for longer and longer. I'd stay there for 2 weeks, I'd stay there for 3 weeks. I'd even stay with the monks when all the 15 retreat rooms were filled. Because lo and behold, this place happened to be a Catholic hermitage. I'm not even a Christian, I'm not really a religious person, but the Benedictine monks were generous enough to open their hearts and their doors to everybody. And as the years went on and I started going more and more often, I noticed 2 curious things. The first is that our house where we'd been living and which we rebuilt in exactly the same property sits at exactly the same elevation as the monastery. It's 1,250 feet above the ocean, and it enjoys this glorious, radiant, unobstructed view of the sea beyond. And I think anybody looking at our house would say it's the last word in tranquility and remoteness. But of course, if ever I were tempted to look at a rabbit when I'm at home, I hear the phone ringing inside. If ever I wanted just to look at the light upon the sea, I think, no way, I have 100 emails I could be answering. And if ever I were tempted to take a walk under the stars, I would think, wait a minute, Alcaraz is playing Sinner tonight. No chance I should miss that. And so I talk myself out of my calm and then wonder why I'm so frazzled. The second thing that struck me was that to this day, and I've been there more than 100 times over 34 years, every time I go, there are 1,000 reasons not to go. I feel really guilty about leaving my aging mother behind, and I feel upset and worried my bosses can't reach me for 72 hours because there's no internet or cell phone reception there. I'm missing a friend's birthday party. But as soon as I arrive, I realize it's only by going there that I'll have anything calm and joyful and creative to share with my mother and my friends and my colleagues, because really otherwise all they're getting is my exhaustion, my distractedness, my call of catch you later. Now you're wondering at this point, why in the world is this guy talking about all this? What has it got to do with humanity's last frontier? But just as Mr. Sarkar was saying, my sense is that humanity's last frontier is really humanity's first frontier, which is what kind of invisible clarity and calm can we find to make our peace with artificial intelligence and all the technologies that are accelerating so quickly. And this is an idea of India, but it's also, I think, an idea from India, because you all know, for millennia, it's really India that has been telling the rest of the world how much we gain by clearing our heads, by sitting still, and by finding some reality behind the show of passing experiences. His Holiness the Dalai Lama always points out, we can only make use of the most modern technologies by bringing to them the most ancient principles and values. So just this week, as it happens, by chance, I brought out a new book that in India is called Listening to Silence. And I think one reason, after 34 years, I wanted to bring it out now, is we all know the world is accelerating at a furious pace. And my prejudice is that humans were never meant to live at a pace determined by machines. The only way we could do that is by becoming machines ourselves. And I don't think even my friends in Silicon Valley would wish for that. And I'm guessing that many of you know this problem whereby we're caught in a vicious cycle whereby we're in such a hurry, we can't see what a hurry we're in. And we have to do something quite dramatic and radical to cut through that self-perpetuating predicament. Now, I know that everybody in this room already does something to clear your head and to clear your schedule. I'm sure many of you have a yoga practice, or many of you practice meditation every day. Maybe some of you go for a run every day, or swim, or play the piano, or play tennis, or cook, or sail. But I think whatever it is we're doing, we need to do more. And even 100 years ago, J.P. Morgan was giving himself 2 months off every year and saying wonderfully that he could never achieve in 12 months what he achieved in 10. There is a reason why Steve Jobs told his colleagues never to use PowerPoint, and why he would take long walks whenever he was deliberating over some essential decision. There's a reason why Bill Gates, every few months, puts a whole set of books in a sack and goes to a little cabin in a deserted island to clear his head, to fill his head, and to prepare to come back in a much more directed way to the busy world. There's a reason that Warren Buffett keeps his calendar almost entirely clean and never follows the Bloomberg monitor. I think all of them know it's only by stepping away from the tumult of the world that you can begin to do justice to it and can begin to see the larger picture. Excuse me, the frog in the throat. I was in a plane all yesterday coming from Japan. But there's another reason why I brought this book out right now. And that is that I've never seen our world and so many of our nations as divided as they are right now. This may apply to India. You could tell me more about that than I know. But certainly in the United States, there's a sense that we're being cut up by essentially our words and our beliefs. I voted for that person, you voted for this one. I belong to this tradition, you belong to that one. I know I'm in the right, which means you must be in the wrong. And one reason why I stress silence is that it's available to everybody, it's non-denominational, and I think it sits on the far side of our ideologies and our ideas. If I were to engage any of you in conversation, at some point I think we would be at odds because our assumptions about the world don't coincide. But if all the 300 of us in this room were joined in a moment of silence, I think we would find ourselves united in some deep part of ourselves that lives far beneath our passing assumptions. There's also another reason why I brought out this book right now, and that's the fact that I've never seen my friends so despairing as they are currently. Between climate change and wars and technologies racing out of control. And in the United States, this book is called A Flame. And I actually flew back last month into Southern California to talk about A Flame the very day that fires were so tragically rewriting so many lives in Los Angeles. And when I drove up to our rebuilt house on the hill, it was to see it pitch black, no phone service, as so often happens nowadays, all the power turned off because of high winds and the high possibility that we could be burnt down again. And so really for 4 days I was handling all my mail and my bills and my interviews just by the light of a little lantern. And my monk friends, because they live on 900 acres of remote wilderness in the hills of California, are constantly encircled by flames and running for their lives. And at one point, at the end of the pandemic, a terrible fire broke out just on the property next to theirs. And nearly all the monks raced off to evacuate, but 3 stayed behind to help the firefighters try to protect their home. And one of them was the prior, who was the center of that community. And quite often he would send out updates to anxious friends, such as myself, to tell us what was going on. And one day he said, "We can see smoke everywhere. There are pulsing lights wherever we look. Every now and then we see just a wall of orange rising up behind the ridge 200 yards away from us. But don't worry, the bells call us to our offices and we're maintaining our vigils, our matins and our vespers just as we normally would. Blessed day all." Blessed day all, he said, on the very day when it looked as if he could very easily lose his life and lose everything that he loved and cared about. And of course, that kind of confidence comes from his faith. But I think it's a confidence all of us long for, whether we have a faith or not. It's the only thing we have to help us through this tumultuous world. The whole world is on fire, literally and metaphorically. Sometimes it may take the form of typhoons or hurricanes or tsunamis, but it's essentially the same thing. And I think everybody on our planet, as during the pandemic, is addressing 2 questions. As was said earlier, how do we stay calm in the midst of mounting uncertainty? And how do we remain hopeful in the face of impermanence?